Welcome and thanks for being here. What you're about to hear is a conversation about permits, trust, and time. It affects corporations, governments, and communities alike. In the world of business expansion and economic development, this country has a serious glass half full, glass half empty problem, one that until now, no one has directly addressed. On the glass half full side, the opportunity is massive. According to McKinsey and Company, companies are prepared to spend roughly $7 trillion globally building and operating data centers. Beyond that, corporations across the United States are ready to invest billions, and in some cases, trillions of dollars in new plants, expansions, and infrastructure. The capital is there. The demand is real, but here's the glass half empty side. All these projects require permits. And again, according to McKinsey, approximately $1.7 trillion in planned expansions are currently stalled, not because companies lack funding or intent, but because of permitting delays. If we look at the air permits alone, the problem becomes extremely real. In states like Minnesota, Title V air permits are backlogged by years. In Oregon, some permits have gone years without renewal. And in parts of Western New York, nearly 90% of Title V facilities are operating under expired permits, some for more than a decade. What's ironic is that many of these delayed projects are data centers being built to support artificial intelligence. Yet, until now, AI itself hasn't been meaningfully used to solve the permitting problems slowing them down. That's what this conversation is about. For corporations, you already have the capital and the legal teams. What you don't have is speed. If permitting timelines could be dramatically reduced without increasing risk, would you do it? For government officials, you're facing growing backlogs, tighter budgets, and more complex regulations. If those backlogs could be reduced without new funding or legislation, would you consider it? And for communities, nonprofits, local leaders, environmental groups, if your concerns were addressed before permits were issued, if your ideas were incorporated into the process, and if companies were required to support real community development rather than just create a small number of jobs, would you support that approach? My name is Julian Smith. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of the Apex Environmental Resolution Group, which created LSARS, the Life Science Analysis and Reporting Solution. Apex combines experience, trust, and real-world collaboration with the LSARS platform, which uses artificial intelligence to organize permits, environmental records, and compliance data, so people, not machines, can identify risks earlier and move projects forward fairly and faster. My role here is simple: to ask the kinds of questions executives, regulators, community leaders, and environmental advocates would ask before trusting anyone with projects that have real environmental and community impact. And it's important to be clear about what this interview is not. This is not design sales pitch. We're not here to sell you anything. Actually, this is an informational conversation. You decide, based on what you hear, whether this approach earns your trust. So as you listen, the question isn't how impressive we think LSARS or Apex is. The question is whether this approach can be customized to meet your needs, your constraints, and your community. With that, I'd like to introduce the founder and visionary behind Apex and the co-founder and visionary behind LSARS, my father, Nelson Smith. Hey, Dad, before we get into your background, I'd love to start with a few tough questions to help listeners decide early on whether Apex and LSARS is even right for them. So let's start here. Who is Apex?
Thank you, Julian. When we say Apex, we're really talking about Apex Environmental Resolution Group. And within that organization, one of the core components is Apex Environmental Solutions Group.
So there's a lot of moving parts here. So give us the short version. Who exactly are Apex Resolution Group, Apex Environmental Consulting, and LSARS?
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts here. Apex Environmental Resolution Group is a collaboration of three entities. HPR Analytics focuses on health-related consulting. LSA Digital develops artificial intelligence and data-driven solutions. And my team, Apex Environmental Solutions Group, works at the intersection of environmental, corporate, government, and community challenges. Together, as a group, we've developed a proprietary AI software platform called LSARS, the Life Science Analysis and Reporting Solution, which brings those disciplines into a single framework designed to resolve complex issues faster and with far less conflict.
Okay, so how exactly did you come up with the concept for Apex and LSARs? And I guess why do you believe you can solve a problem that so far, no one else has solved? I guess in other words, what makes you different?
Julian, that's a really, really good question, and it's one that we've had to wrestle with for a while. The most effective way to solve complex problems isn't to start by trying to fix them directly. It's to take successful processes from one area and then apply them to another area thoughtfully. And let me give you two examples. For decades, companies tried and failed to solve hair loss problems by targeting the problem directly. Then a drug called minoxidil was developed to treat high blood pressure. Hair growth wasn't the goal, but physicians observed it was happening in real world use. That observation led to one of the most widely used hair loss treatments in the world. Then the same thing happened with weight loss drugs. GLP-1 medications were developed to treat diabetes. And during the clinical use, the doctors consistently observed reduced appetite and sustained weight loss. What started as an unintended effect became a breakthrough once it was carefully studied and developed. In both of these cases, the solution didn't come from trying to fix the problem directly. It came from observing real world outcomes and asking a better question: what else can this process solve? It's that principle that led to Apex and LSARs.
So I guess walk me through this. You didn't set out to solve air permitting delays initially.
Exactly. We didn't start by saying, hey, let's fix air permitting. The solution emerged through years of observing real world failures across litigation, regulation, community advocacy, and economic development. What I saw repeatedly was that permitting delays weren't just regulatory problems, they were process failures. Failures of coordination, trust, timing, and incentives. And those failures hurt everyone: companies, regulators, and communities.
Can you walk us maybe a little bit through the experience that gave you the foundation to see this differently?
Gladly. This actually comes from more than 35 years of work across government, private practice, litigation, and community development, both in the United States and internationally. I began my career as the lead national environmental compliance and policy attorney for NASA. I worked in environmental law, engineering, and regulatory analysis, and many other fields. I represented corporations and communities in complex environmental litigation and developed community focused environmental plans across multiple regions. Across all of it, one insight kept repeating: the traditional way we try to solve environmental problems leaves critical gaps.
So, what process did you rely on to address those gaps?
Actually, I didn't rely on any of them. I took three processes, developed them independently over decades. First, creating workable solutions for government that lacked funding but still faced complex environmental responsibilities. Second, using what we call preventive market based incentives, which is rewarding companies for reducing pollution before it occurs, rather than only penalizing them afterwards. Third, helping communities use environmental technologies to build economic structures, not just compliance outcomes. Apex and LSARs bring these three processes: government efficiencies, corporate incentives, and community economics into a single integrated approach.
And I know that communities have been promised a lot over the years here. I guess the question that I'm sure that they have is why should they trust you?
You're right. Trust can't be claimed, it has to be demonstrated. For more than 25 years, I've chosen to represent people and communities, even when it came at a personal cost. I represented clients in major pharmaceutical litigation, ensuring that they were supported beyond settlement. Spent over a decade representing thousands of individuals affected by the opioid crisis, listening to every client and developing frameworks others described as fair. I worked directly with city leaders, nonprofits, and residents in places like Newark, New Jersey, regional leaders internationally, always listening first and then designing second. You see, the best solutions come from people most affected by the outcome.
Okay, Cool, cool. So I'm curious, do you have experience bringing corporations and communities together as well?
Yes, actually, from both sides. I was hired by a Fortune 100 company to help them avoid massive verdicts in high risk jurisdictions. This approach wasn't defensive, it was relational. We listened, engaged locally, and helped create real economic benefits. And over time, the company stopped being viewed as an adversary. And then years later, I represented those very same communities. I've also spent years working alongside hourly employees, not as management, but as a worker, because understanding people requires where they stand. That's why Apex Environmental Solutions Group is family owned. These principles weren't theorized, they were lived.
You've explained the philosophy and the process. How does this work in practice?
It starts with building teams that can earn trust across all sides. Then it requires something most teams skip: spending real time listening to regulators, companies, communities, advocates, and those building those insights directly into LSARs.
So many people are here to understand LSARs. What is it, plainly and practically, if you could explain it for the viewers?
Sure, LSAR stands for Life Science Analysis and Reporting. It's not a traditional product, and it doesn't replace regulators, lawyers, engineers, or communities. LSARS uses artificial intelligence to organize massive amount of environmental permitting, regulatory, and compliance information into a single coherent system so people can actually understand it and work from the same set of facts. Today, that information is fragmented across agency files, consultant reports, emails, spreadsheets, public comments, historical permits, and enforcement records. LSARS brings this together and organizes it chronologically and contextually and makes relationships visible. What changed, when, why, and who raised such concerns. So LSARS doesn't make decisions, people do. It removes confusion, fragmentation, and blind spots that slow everything down and creates mistrust.
A lot of people claim to use AI. What makes LSARs different?
Most systems optimize for one stakeholder. LSARS works across all stakeholders simultaneously. It's process driven to achieve the outcomes the stakeholders are looking for. Issues surface earlier when they're cheaper and easier to resolve. For example, when fast, high quality risk assessment data flows into a dashboard, there's less back and forth between regulators and permit requesters, and the process goes much faster. It's inclusive by design. And community and input and agency feedback are incorporated early and tracked over time. And LSARS identifies patterns humans often miss: reoccurring objections, regulatory inconsistencies, outdated conditions, and likely delay points. For corporations, this means less uncertainty and shorter timelines. And for agencies, backlogs without added staff. And for communities, accountability and visibility.
You've mentioned economic development plans. How do we know that they work?
Our model draws from military offset programs used globally. You see, countries like Turkey require companies to invest locally through structural industrial participation. The UAE, for example, centralizes offset funds through the Taiwan Zone Council, converting obligation into measurable objects. We adopt that model to environmental and permitting projects. Here, we're focusing on workforce training, infrastructure, renewable energy, and community monitoring. LSARS tracks every commitment dollar and outcome so obligations don't disappear after permits are issued.
How long does it take to see these results?
Based on pilots and simulations, we believe that tangible results appear within 12 to 18 months. Some benefits, like coordination and transparency, are actually immediate. Others take time, but progress is measurable from day one.
Can this work globally as well?
Yes, it can actually work globally. You see, LSARS creates transparency and accountability even when enforcement structures are weak. It aligns incentives, it tracks commitments, and creates virtual enforcement through visibility.
So LSARs and Apex aren't just tools, they're a framework.
Exactly. You see, LSARS is the engine, Apex is the trusted operator, and the community are the validators.
Okay, so last question. You said that you're not selling. You do want people to buy. What does that mean?
You see, that's a very good question, and I'm glad that it's near the end. What we ask for is 30 minutes, not to pitch, but to listen. No pressure, no commitments, and out of listening comes clarity. Sometimes the right answer is no. And trust is built faster by honesty more so than persuasion. Buying happens naturally when people feel heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, measure everything, trust through transparency, and remember, trust creates building processes and it creates lasting results.